Welcome into another edition of the FutureSox RoundUp. My name is Elijah Evans, joined today by my co-host Dylan Barnas. We are back. We are so back. Colson Montgomery is in the big leagues. The White Sox will be drafting 10th overall in less than a week. The All-Star game featuring Shane Smith will be in a little over a week. We've got a lot going on. It's July. We're rolling. We're 3 weeks out of the trade deadline, so we've got a lot of things to discuss today. Dylan and I are going to kind of hit on all of it. We're going to talk a little bit of Colson Montgomery. I know James and Ian did a great job talking about that yesterday, but we're going to talk a little Colson because we're excited and we can. And we're going to get into some guys just to keep an eye on in the minors. We're going to walk through the minor league levels, fly through some of the headline players at each level. Then we're going to talk some trade candidates, just talk about the guys on this roster who, we'll have other times in a couple weeks after All-Star and after the draft and everything to really get into mock trades. I'm going to be putting together some mocks, but for now, we'll just kind of mention the guys that could be of interest and potential teams that could be looking at some of the White Sox trade candidates. But first of all, Dylan, how you doing, man? What's going on?
I'm good. I was really happy with Colson Montgomery's debut series in Denver over the weekend. I mean, he looked like he'd been there before. And for a guy who struggled as much as he did in AAA to come up and go, what was it, 5 for 10 in his first 3 games with a triple for his first big league hit that, honestly, it should have been out in any other ballpark. But I mean, he looked really good. He looked really fluid at shortstop too, which is something that I don't think a lot of people were expecting from him. I know that a lot of people are pushing him to third already, but I mean, you saw the play he made tonight where it's diving play up the middle, took a hit away from Kirk. I mean, he looks like a shortstop, and that's really good to see. And if he's 6 at short, the entire outlook just looks completely different.
Yeah, so I thought back on the episode we did probably, I think maybe about a month or so ago, and we were talking about, where does this infield go when you've got Colson up, and what does that look like? And it's not that I think he would be a perfectly good third baseman, and the White Sox could make the roster work with him shifting to third. However, if he's at shortstop, it opens so many layers to the way you can kind of craft this lineup moving forward because you've got a Chase Meidroth who can play second base for you. You no longer have to have a rotating second baseman. Even if Meidroth, it falls into more utility role, you've got guys like Lenyn Sosa. You've got some other pieces of players who can be a piece at second base, right? Then you have Miguel Vargas who can stay at third base, or you find a third baseman you want to add, you can add a third baseman and Miguel Vargas can shift to first base and vice versa, right? There's a lot of flexibility there. I love to see the way he's looked defensively at shortstop, but also he just looks more like himself at the plate, man. And he looks like more, obviously the version of himself we've seen the past month in Charlotte, but even more just the guy that we saw that was a top prospect in, the 2022-2023 seasons, where he's taking pitches at a better rate than he was last year. He looks like most of his hits have been pull side so far, but they still are not necessarily sold out for pull side, which is something we noticed him doing at times last season. So we're going to see what happens as he continues to settle in. Obviously there'll be the ups and downs, of course, but 4 games into his career, it's really encouraging to just see Colson Montgomery at the big league level and see him locked in and see him looking like a strong, confident player at this point, in his first week in the league.
Yeah, and if one of Caro or Teal does end up moving to first base, or they split duties between there and catcher, then Vargas can shift back to third. And he wasn't the greatest defender over there. I know that he started off hot, but sort of tailed off after he was bouncing back and forth. But I mean, if he can stick at short, man, then you just have so many different ways to just build the infield. And I really don't think that there's a bad way to make it out of the combinations that you can build it. Like, there's a lot of good infielders that are on the team right now and will be coming soon.
Yeah, 100%. I think that there's a lot there's a lot of flexibility. I think it's going to get really interesting just to see kind of where the org decides to go with adding and with adjusting pieces. And I think Colson is expected to be a piece of that, of course, but let's see it for a few months, right? Let's see what it looks like. Well, I mean, I'm hoping, knock on wood, that he will be playing pretty much every day for the rest of the season. There's zero reason why he shouldn't be. Same goes for Meidroth, same goes for Caro and Teal, which I still don't get why we're seeing Edgar Caro and Kyle only play half the days of the week. Regardless, we've talked about that for 2 weeks now, 3 weeks. It just, they can't be platooning. It just has to be every day. And Colson, I think, of all else will be for sure. It definitely seems that way. But, I want to see it. Let's see it for 3 months. Even if he struggles, let's see it for 3 months. And then we will see where things go going into the offseason and next year and beyond, right?
Yeah, and I think that there was one key game where Will Venable realized that, like, oh, I don't want to play. I don't want to have one catcher catching and then one catcher DHing. It was the game in Texas that went into extra innings, and then you had Tyler Alexander batting because you pinch ran for, I believe it was Caro in I think it was like the eighth or ninth, and then Teal had to go in to catch, and then you sold your DH, and now you have Tyler Alexander batting in the 11th inning. Like, it was, I think that game was the
Yeah.
last game that both of them were in the lineup together. So, but
So
that shouldn't stop
what
it.
does that
That shouldn't
mean then?
stop
Okay, so this is where I go. The current structure of this roster, I generally am not someone who would go for a third three catchers on the roster,
it.
but
Yeah,
at some point there's not that much value on the bench right now. You can't look at the bench and say, "Oh, you got four guys on your bench that are significant upgrades offensively over hypothetically a Corey Lee or a Kyle Teal or an Edgar Caro." So, at what point do you just say screw it? And if you're going to play Caro and Teal every day, DHing and catching, you just have Corey Lee on your bench for that safety
right. Yeah,
factor. Like, I'd rather do that than continue to waste at bats and just continue to not let these two develop in the way you need to see them develop. So, the way I look at it is like, if they're not comfortable with their two catchers on their roster being in the lineup every day because of that reason for a late game security purpose, then just bring up Corey Lee. I don't care,
yeah,
honestly. Make waste a bench spot on having Corey Lee on the roster. You just can't. I just it's not. I just don't think losing a roster spot on Corey Lee is justification for not letting those guys play every day. That's where I'm at.
yeah. And then it just makes a little bit less of sense why you would trade Tice if you're not going to play
Right.
both catchers at the same
Right.
time.
Right.
Because then, like, it just makes no sense. Because then
Yeah.
you traded him to open up a spot for Teal once he was ready, and then you send Corey Lee down, and then now you are in the same situation where one is playing, one is not, and then you end up pinch hitting one for the other in like the eighth inning based on handedness advantage. With, I don't know, it's pretty stupid, but I would just like to see both of them in the lineup because they're both good young hitters and they need to develop
Yeah.
somehow, and they're not going to do that playing
I'm
3-4 days a week.
I'm with you. And again, like the numbers, I think people get really easy to just look at the numbers and be like, oh, whatever. And, Edgar Carroll's not hitting that well. Like, we've seen plenty of flashes from both Caro and Teal that give you signs of seeing who they are as top 100 prospects in baseball, as legit future catchers. Like you can see the signs. I know the numbers aren't amazing, but like you can see the signs there. And I, envision a time where these two are going to only get better. But like, they're going to get better when they play every day. So let's play them every day. That's where I'm at. I just, I see that being the status there. But regardless of that, Colson Montgomery, good to have him in the bigs.
Yep.
More young players make this team even more fun to watch. I'm just ready for, more and more of these guys to get to the league, and Colson is obviously the next of the big names to reach the bigs. And I do think that, somebody just mentioned this. I do think the deadline will clear some things up for sure.
Yeah.
There's definitely
100%.
multiple guys you can get rid of, assuming you're getting rid of guys that we're going to talk about later in the episode. There's plenty of rentals that can clear off this roster soon enough, and that will continue to open up more at bats and continue to open up more innings for the guys that really need them for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and it's something that, we've been saying for, I don't know, like 5 months now. Like, the roster and the starting nine is going to look completely different after the trade deadline. It's going to be
Right.
a lot of young players who, don't really have much MLB experience, or they don't have any at all. And
Right.
it's gonna be really fun to see the outlook of the team going forward, and it's just about guys proving if they can hang in the big leagues or not. And I think we're gonna see some guys prove it, and then some guys not. And that's
Yep.
just the way it goes. Prospects aren't 100% success rate. If it did, then if it was 100% success rate, then last rebuild wouldn't have gone the way it did. But here we are.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's how it goes. There'll be some more roster spots, but for now, let's get into some of the other stuff we're going to get to today. We'll leave the major leagues at that. We'll have plenty of time to talk about the big league team with the deadline stuff. I think deadline time is when we really get to dive into the big league team while talking about prospects, because they kind of go hand in hand at that time of year. But for now, before we get into the minor league stuff, our usual coverage, brief check-in on the draft. I had a great interview that I did earlier today with Pete Flaherty of Baseball America. That should be out tomorrow, so everybody check out that FutureSox interview. We have Pete on every year during draft season, and he's a friend of mine, but also just knows his stuff. I threw a bunch of names at him that I've seen circulated in the White Sox world, and he just kind of broke them down, right? So we talked through some of the early round options, right? Heard some really interesting buzz of, how that's going to go, how it's going to shake out. Seems like he is in kind of the same hearings of the White Sox are leaning towards those prep shortstops, but it also seems like there is a possibility they could go a different direction depending on how those first handful of picks shake out. We talked a little bit about some of the later rounds, some of the second round guys that you could potentially, drag a high school guy down to that pick with a little bit of a higher bonus, just like Bonnemer last season. Where are you at, just briefly before we get into the minors? Who do you like? What's your ideal world, and what's your kind of realistic thinking right now as we head into the draft this weekend?
My ideal world would be JoJo Parker at 10. I've been saying it for like 2-3 months now. He's my guy in this draft cycle, and it seems like he's probably going to go above 10, which is unfortunate. But I think that he's a good enough player to go probably even top 5. I could see him going 3rd overall to the Mariners. I could see him going 8th overall to I think it's the Marlins, who have
Marlins are at 7, I think.
7, yeah. I could see that. Yeah. But yeah, I think that he's probably going to go above 10. But then you end up with a guy like Billy Carlson staring at you on the board, and I don't think that the White Sox pass on him because it seems like everything we've heard is the White Sox want to draft a prep shortstop who is going to stick at shortstop long term. And Billy Carlson is exactly that. Yep. And I think that he's probably going to be the best player available on the board just based on how the top 10 shakes out. I think that there's not going to be too much craziness on draft day. And, he's probably at the top of their boards. I don't know, but I think that he's going to end up being Nick. But there are a couple other options that I could see, but I don't really have any faith in that being the plan.
Yeah, there's plenty of ways I think it could go. Talking to Pete, it doesn't sound like Parker's going to be there. It seems to me from everybody I've talked to and from people that I know that are super tapped into that world that Parker has gotten a ridiculous amount of helium. And at this point, it looks like he will be that 3rd college bat behind Holiday and Willits, who are both expected to be top 5. So from there, I think that it's unlikely Parker makes it to the White Sox. I do think the White Sox would take him if he's there at 10. 100%. But to me, I get the gauge he's going in the 5 to 8 range pretty much guaranteed at this point, which you never know. There's no guarantees with the MLB draft, so you never know. But I do think Carlson could definitely be in play. The Baseball America staff draft had him at 16, and Pete was saying kind of that was a little bit more a result of situations and just different people's opinions. But at the same time, he said there's a world where Carlson goes anywhere between kind of 5 and like 20. So I do think if Carlson falls to that 10 spot, I think he's a very real option. I also think Steele Hall could be completely in play, and it sounds like I think I heard from Pete a little bit about some degree of concern with the impact of Hall in terms of like the long-term upside of what he can be. With that said, a lot of raw tools, the best speed in the draft. Like I don't mind that. I think a hit tool guy with elite speed, very natural traits is interesting for sure. So I could see that being the case. And I also think that he indicated that if Steele were the pick there, that would open up some money definitely for that, that second pick to be a little bit more of a spend. He mentioned that Jaden Fauske could legit be an option still at 44, which I have a hard time seeing, but I think if he was floated late first round money, there's a chance it's possible. We also talked about some college guys in the second round, and we talked about some third round guys. So everybody should check that out for sure. I do think the White Sox go high school heavy though, prep heavy. James Fox has been saying this. We've been talking about this with other people in the draft world. My guy Tyler Jennings who does our college content at Just Baseball, he was saying how he thinks, it looks like it's going to be pretty prep heavy early. Like I think that at least 2 of the first 3 are going to be prep guys for the White Sox.
I would be shocked if they aren't, honestly.
Right, you'd think so. I think it's going to be 2 of 3 at least, and maybe 3 of 3. So we'll see what happens. But the draft is coming up. It's exciting. So make sure everybody's checking in with FutureSox. We've got Pete Flaherty on. James and Ian have Joe Doyle on. We're going to have a live stream on Sunday. James and Ian will be running that. They're going to have Burke Granger on. I might pop in. Dylan might pop in. We're going to have a ton of stuff coming. So definitely get to it and stick up with us. We're going we're gonna be pumping out draft content. It's exciting. I love talking
Yep.
about the draft, and I know Dylan and I next week will definitely get on and really break down some of the later picks and everything because it's fun. You really can't prepare information for anywhere past round like 3 or 4. It's kind of just a crapshoot at that point. But once we know the picks, then we can dive into every player and look at their college stats, their prep stats, their profile, how they fit into the organization, all of that such stuff. So always exciting and always fun to really dive into draft content once the draft happens next week.
Yeah, it's a busy time of the year for us with draft content, trade deadline. There's going to be a lot of new prospects in the system in the coming 3 weeks that we gotta tell everybody about. And there's going to be, in my opinion, there's going to be a lot of toolsed up high ceiling guys that the farm system as a whole can go from looking like not the highest ceiling to there's guys up and down the system where they've got some pretty star-studded ceilings, and and it's just development. And the White Sox don't have the greatest track record developing high school players, but we've seen in recent years that some of the younger guys are taking a step forward. Like, I mean, look at Colson Montgomery, first round guy out of high school, and here we are 4 years later. It's 4 years, right? Yeah, he was 21.
Yeah, 21, yeah. Exactly. So we'll see what happens. There's so much to cover, and we're going to be excited to do it. For now, a lot of people mentioning some names in the chat that I like some of these names. I don't love some of them, but I also like some of them. So give and take there. But let's get into some minor league guys though. For now, we'll kind of breeze through the system because I want to talk some trade guys here at the end of the episode. But we'll talk through just the guys in the past week. Obviously, we saw Colson finished up really hot in the minors. He had a ridiculous last week in AAA, and then he makes it to the bigs, and now he's there. So starting in Charlotte, there's some the White Sox minor league system has some interesting ups and downs. There's definitely some teams right now that are more fun to watch, and some teams that are definitely harder to watch right now. Charlotte being one that it's been a little tough to watch at times recently, but overall a decent season in Charlotte. Who from the past couple weeks here, or the past week or two here, is checking in Charlotte?
I mean, Tim Elko just continues to dominate AAA hitting or AAA pitching. He's got an 1,100 OPS his last 2 weeks after being sent down. I believe it was about a month ago now. But I mean, he's just he's a very polarizing guy. He might end up being like a quad A player that is just shuttled between the big leagues and AAA. But I mean, he just absolutely tears up AAA pitching. And he's not striking out as much as he was in
15 and 10 games.
Oh, is it 15? Okay, I think I got the walking
15 in his last 10.
Yeah. Okay, then maybe not. But either way, he's still impacting the ball like Tim Elko does. And Ryan Noda, what are we doing? Tristan Gray today? I don't really know. I think that Tim Elko should get a shot because who cares, right? Like he might end up being something, but Tristan Gray and Ryan Noda are not going to be anything.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's tricky with Elko because I still struggle to see an everyday big league player when I watch him hit, and that's not to discredit what he's done because he's been exceptional, and I completely agree with you that he should be in the bigs because why not, right? I don't see the reason not to because of where this team's at right now. With that said, there's just got to be some level of continual development there, and he has at times this season looked better with the approach, but since he went back down and was in Charlotte from what was it the 14th on, just pulling up the numbers now, looking at since he went back down to Charlotte on June 14th, it's a 33% strikeout rate, and there's some players that get by with that, but you've got to be, and he has been a great hitter still. He has a 150 WRC plus in that span, so it's not like he's not raking. Mm-hmm. You got to be a really special hitter to survive over a 30% strikeout rate, and that's just that's just the matter of the fact. That's any big league player. That's not a knock on Tim Elko. It's going to be interesting to see when he gets another big league shot, because I do expect after the deadline for him to be back up and to continue to get at bats, because there's no reason not to. Again, if Colton is playing shortstop, then Vargas should be playing third, and we don't need Josh Rojas there. We don't need anybody else there, right? Then Tim Elko should be playing first. It's a chain reaction, right? That's how it's going to go, and that's how it should go after the deadline when there's some roster spaces cleared up. But it's tough with Elko. I want to see him succeed. I really do. I just still am not sure I see more than maybe a bench power bat.
Yeah, it just really it's very polarizing because you see the 460-foot homers, and then he goes stretches where he strikes out 8 times in 15 at bats, and you're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, for sure.
moving on from Elko, Drew Baker, the prospect acquired in the Matt Tice deal from the Tampa Bay Rays, has quietly been doing pretty well. He's got a 313 batting average over the last 2 weeks. And, he's not going to impact the ball much. He's just really a contact guy who can steal a couple bases. But, I mean, he's putting together a decent few stretches of games.
Yeah, it's good to see. I mean, Baker, that's a 25-year-old outfielder, right? This is a guy who's played center field. Should be an average to plus defensive outfielder in addition to being a decent hit tool guy. He's had a really rough last year and a half in the minor leagues, and generally this season was tough for him. But in 25 games since coming over, it started slow, but he's getting there. You're completely right. I mean, it's been much better the past week or two, especially. And that's a guy who I think if Robert does get traded, right, we're going to talk about the other guys like. Pretty much this whole outfield, I think, is on the trade block. I think Benintendi probably sticks around, but I wouldn't be shocked if they move Benintendi. But assuming Benintendi sticks around, like the rest of the outfield should have at bats wide open. In which case, I would not mind seeing Drew Baker get a cup of coffee for September. I mean, it's again, he's not wowing you. The numbers aren't jumping off the page by any means. But if he's a 25-year-old outfielder who's playing good defense plus speed and can give you some decent at bats, and you want to give him a chance in September, good by me.
Right. Yeah, that's totally fine. And, I think the Matt Tice trade that brought him to the White Sox, you got him for like $50,000. And then you flip him into an actual, I don't want to say a piece, but like it's a human, and you got him for $50,000. Like, human. Yeah. Like, and, Baker might not be anything, but I mean, he's still a decent guy to watch where, you hit the nail on the head. Speedy, good defender who can play center field, and if he's hitting 313 in the big league or in AAA, he can be a 260 hitter, and he'll take that from a guy who's mainly going to be a speed and defensive primary player. So,
yeah, 100%, man.
Moving on to the pitching side, Noah Schultz made his second AAA start, and it wasn't great in terms of the stat line. But then you look at some of the under the hood numbers, and you're like, how is he getting this unlucky? Because he's given up 2 homers, or I think it's up to 4 now in both starts. But like his movements are still really good. He's just struggling with command, and it seems like they're phasing out the cutter entirely, which I don't really understand or know if that's gonna stick, because Brian Bannister said in reply on Twitter that it has a higher strike percentage than his other pitches, but then it sort of messes up his hand positioning, and then the seam shifted wake on his sinker like goes down because of how much he's throwing the cutter, which makes sense. And obviously pitchers in Charlotte, you really should not be looking at their stat lines if you want to look at the like true performance of the player. And Schultz it's his first season of just pitching without the rails on, and I'm not really too concerned about AAA pitching numbers because it's just such a tough environment to pitch in. And he's still throwing hard. Like I've seen him throw 97 in the 6th inning. I think it was like his first start. He blew 97.8 on his, I think like 3rd or 4th to last pitch. So
right. Yeah, 100%. I'm not worried about Noah. I'm really not at all. I think he feels good. After everything I've heard, he's healthy. He feels like he's getting settled in there. He's getting in the groove. He's 22 years old pitching in AAA where you're facing 27, 28-year-old MLB veterans, right? Like that is what AAA is, and especially in a place like Charlotte where it's hard to pitch. I have no concern for Schultz yet, honestly. For me, I just really want to keep seeing it a couple times, and we'll see how it keeps going, and I'm really not too worried at all there.
Yeah. And then, so that kind of wraps up Charlotte. There's not much to talk about there. There's not too many.
One brief name I want to just tip a name because this guy has been in the minors. I was just looking. I just had to take a peek at the stats. Yohendrys Gomez has been in the minor leagues for 8 years and has really never put together a season this good. And his 8th minor league season, which I just want to give him a quick shout out because he's up to 25 innings, 25 and 2/3 innings with the White Sox in Charlotte, and a 2.4 ERA, 33 strikeouts across those 25 and 2/3, only 12 walks, 2 home runs allowed in a place like Charlotte in 9 appearances. He's been really solid and sneaky, only 25 years old. I think when you see these kind of, minor league free agents get added to the roster in AAA, you typically will assume They are more of a, just a filler, whatever. And I know he was up in the bigs for, what was it? Just a couple games, maybe. He had
Yeah.
three innings for the White Sox after, doing a couple. But he pitched earlier in the season in 6 games for the Yankees and was actually pretty effective for them. Walked a number of guys, but didn't give up a ton of hard contact. A 3 little brief major league stints. But if you're making major league stints with the Dodgers and the Yankees earlier in the season and now shoving in AAA, I wouldn't mind seeing him in the pen for the last 2 months of the season.
The bullpen has been an area of much disdain for the White Sox.
Yeah,
and
of course.
if he ends up being somebody that you can hand the ball to down the stretch, why not? Like
Sure.
it's better than some other options that you watch him come in and you're like, all right, this game is over, this lead is gone, and then home run.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Peyton Paulette too, I think, is another name that is knocking on the door of a call up. He's had a good last couple weeks, and I really don't know why he or Jairo Iriarte are really spending much time in AAA, because it's the same thing with Schultz. Pitching in AAA right now is just awful. Like, it's so hard to pitch there, and I don't want to say I don't understand why they're sending their top pitching prospects to AAA, but it's also like, well, if they are having good results in AA and how hard it is to pitch in AAA, why even send them there? They just help them build the confidence up in AA, and then when they're ready, just call them up straight from Birmingham.
Yeah, I hear you. Nothing against that at all, for sure. Should we head to Birmingham? Speaking of,
yeah, I think that there's one guy that we have been talking about the last couple weeks, and he's still somehow not being talked about enough. Tanner McDougal, man. I mean, I'm simply running out of words to describe the run that he's on, because you said it last week with Jeff. If he were a college pitcher and was drafted last year, if he had went to college instead of being drafted out of high school, I'm not sure that there are 5 better prospects in the White Sox system. If we looked at him as a guy who was drafted out of college last year and this was his first full year in the minors, I think he would be a top 6, 7 prospect in the White Sox system.
I top 4, top 5.
Yeah, it's unreal. And I know Ian was chopping up videos all night on Tanner McDougal's start, and he hit 101. If he can consistently hold that velo into the late innings, I seriously don't know how high his ceiling is, because the walks are down this year, which is something that we have never seen before from Tanner McDougal, and he just looks the part of a really good pitching prospect.
Yeah, I mean, particularly the last. I've seen a couple people mention it. Is there a chance he get called up this year? I don't want to do that. I wouldn't be shocked if he got a little cup of toffee in September, just out of maybe a couple innings out of the pen or something, just to be like, oh, you earned this, you worked hard this year. But at the same time, I don't see any rush for him. I think that this has been an incredible building season for him, and you don't want to wear his arm too much. He's already he's gonna top his innings, for his career innings for sure. I think at this point, and it's been so impressive. But I also think there's no rush, and you don't need to push it past the limited end by any means, right? I mean, McDougal's at 79 innings right now. Last year he finished the year with 92. So it's don't get him to 100. Yeah, I'm good to 100, 110 even, maybe. It seems like he's doing well still right now, but you don't need to push that past 110 maybe. I think you can kind of ease him up here, and after August and beyond, right, you get a little break here for the little coming up here, and then you get him finish his season for sure. But I don't think you need to push the agenda too much with this guy. But he's been special, man. I mean, his last 3 starts, it's 1 run allowed across the last 3 starts, 4 walks in those 16 innings, 19 strikeouts. The stuff is up there with anybody. I mean, I'm looking at, I was able to get some data on him, and his curveball grades at on most models at a 60 grade, which for those who know, pitching grades, that's a 20 to 80 scale. His curveball is a 60, 65 even, potentially, you could argue. The fastball is grading out as a 55, but with the added velo that it's at right now, and that was when it was sitting 97 kind of for metrically, now it's sitting more 98 lately. it's a really, really good arsenal. And the changeup has been better than I expected it to be. Honestly, it's developed into a legit offering. He's mixing in a slider that isn't grading out great, but it's still, if that can be a change of pace pitch here and there, like awesome. Just a nice gyro slider to blend off of the curveball and the fastball combo. That's obviously his bread and butter. Like, this guy's legit. He's going to be a top 10 prospect in the system, I think. When we do our re-rank, and even with draft class guys factored in, he's still going to be in that range. I think. I don't see why he shouldn't be at this point. It's really hard for me every time I look at the list of the organization. It's really hard to think of guys who are ahead of him. Honestly, there's not many that are clearly ahead of him at this point, and he just keeps shoving. So it's been great for McDougal.
Yeah, 100%. And then another pitcher in that Birmingham rotation who had a really good start last week, Shane Murphy. 8 innings, 5 hits, 1 earned run, 2 walks, only 3 punch-outs. But for a guy like him to go 8 innings, like that's you take that every single day, because he's a I don't want to say soft contact thrower, but he doesn't get a lot of swing and miss and is overpowering stuff. He's just going to hit spots, dot up, and then make you ground softly to William Bergoya or Jacob Gonzalez. Like, yeah, he's a very crafty pitcher, and he's had a very good last couple games. He's allowed 1 run, no runs, 3, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1. Like, yeah, the start on June 21st was the most earned runs he's allowed in any start this year, and it's 3. So like, yep. It's been really good for Murphy recently. He's not going to, like I said, blow anybody away, but if he can be a solid like lefty out of the bullpen, like, I don't know, Tyler Gilbert, I know he hasn't been good, but if he can be like that change of pace guy that comes in the 6th, 7th inning and even be a bulk guy, like that's a pretty solid piece.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you right there. That's a guy that I think, is just, he continues to shove, man. He just keeps doing it. I think he's going to get some, at the very least, just missed, but I think you can make a case he sneaks into the very back of the top 30 at this point. I mean, he's sneaky, only 24. Like, I feel like I think of him as an even older guy based on being a CC guy, kind of working his way through the system. But it just continues to be very impressive what he's doing. The numbers have just been great, honestly. He just keeps really just doing his thing and just keeps making it happen. I got somebody asking the BA. I just want to address this real quick. I don't know what Baseball America's rankings were, to be honest. No disrespect to Baseball America. We just had Pete Flaherty on. Love Baseball America for many things, for sure. I am very confused by their top 30 for the White Sox. I don't get why certain players are ranked where they were. I don't get why Drew Thorpe was on the list. Different sites have different eligibility. Generally speaking, BA does keep people on their list longer in terms of their eligibility requirements to be considered a prospect still, because they're a prospect outlet and a college and prospect focused outlet only. I think that's part of why they tend to keep players on their lists, even when they're not technically MLB eligible anymore. So that's just some clarity there. But McDougal ranked 22nd on the Baseball America top 30. I don't think there's 21 prospects better than him. I don't think there's 10 prospects better than him. So just an interesting. Everybody's got their own ranking systems, and it's all subjective. So I'm not going to tell anybody's brain that their ranking is wrong. But I don't see it quite that way. So we'll see.
Yeah, I try not to put too much stock into like other outlets or other people's lists, because like, everybody can have their own opinion, and it's good to see what other people think, but like there are simply not 21 better White Sox prospects than Tanner McDougal. Like, that's just simply not true. Staying in Birmingham, another pitcher who has been just absolutely unreal recently is Zach Franklin. Do you want to guess how many strikeouts Zach Franklin has?
We did this last week in a similar range. What's your range?
His last 13.2 innings, dating back to May 31st. 13.2 innings.
13.2 innings. I'll go 20. He's been insane, dude. 27.
That is exactly right.
I gut shot that? Wow, that's pretty good. Wow.
27 walks to only...
I need to get outside, dude. I need to touch some grass. Wow.
27 strikeouts to only 6 walks in 13.2 innings, only 2 earned runs, and 9 hits allowed. Like, he's just carving up double-A hitters. And like we highlighted him, I think it was like at the end of last year, because his fastball had like the highest swing and miss rate of any pitch in the minor leagues.
Right.
And he's doing that again this year, and we're seeing the unreal strikeout numbers, and it's another guy where it's like, all right, he's building confidence in Double-A, call him up straight from there, because the White Sox bullpen needs help, and it's going to need help after the deadline in a couple of weeks, where you trade off a couple guys that we'll mention later. But
I'm with you.
I'm all
I'm
for it.
with you.
I'm all for it.
Zach Franklin, let's see it. Who else you got in Birmingham to touch on here?
A couple hitters, Ryan Galaney, Caden Connor. They've been having good weeks or good last couple weeks for Birmingham standards. It's not the best like all around performance, but the Southern League is a very hard league to hit at. I think both of their OPSs are like around the 740 mark in the last couple weeks. But in a league that's hard to hit, like the Southern League, a 740 OPS might be like 20 points above league average just
Right.
because of how dominant the pitchers are there. But Galaney has been a guy who's like has really just impressed me, even after he's cooled down since being promoted to Double A. Like he's just been hitting the baseball, and I really think that a promotion to Triple A could be coming next year. It could happen at the tail end of this year. But I mean, he's starting to be too good for Double A because I mean the rest of the lineup needs some protection, or not protection, but the lineup would look a lot worse without Ryan Galaney in it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, it was a rough stretch there for a couple weeks, but this past week he bounces back. This past week he goes 7 for 22, 885 OPS, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts in the past week. So nice to see him bounce back after a couple rough weeks there for sure.
And then Hagen Smith made his second start off of the dev list on I think it was July 4th. I was watching him and Colson Montgomery both make their or him and Colson Montgomery at the same time. But it just is kind of confusing to me. I know we were talking about this a little bit off camera. Why are they only letting him throw 40, 30 pitches? Like it just makes no sense that they would activate him to only throw 2.2 innings, or I think it was like 1 2/3 his first outing. Like I really just don't understand the mindset there, because if you're going to activate him, I think you would want to have him be fully healthy. I'm not sure. But
I don't think it's a health thing. I think it's more of them just trying to like ease up the way he's pitching and kind of just ramping him slowly. I don't quite get it either. I'm with you. I generally think that it's an interesting dynamic with him because, he comes back and it's not that he looks solid. Like he gave up a big homer in that game, but it wasn't, generally speaking, it was 5 strikeouts and 2 2/3, right? So he struck out, 5 of the 7 batters he got out, right? The command was a little iffy, 2 walks and a hit by pitch, right? And then that homer. So like a mixed bag of things from him, but like I'd love to see that mixed bag in a 4-inning, 5-inning spurt, right? Instead of being cut across in the 3rd inning, and I get that it's trying to limit it to a degree, but it's just like, I don't know, man. I'm very curious to see. I think James kind of said he thinks it could be an Arizona Fall League thing for Hagen, which could make some sense for sure. Yeah. I think that's very likely for him at this point, considering we're in July and Hagen Smith has 30 innings this season. You're going to need a lot more than 30 innings in the season for Hagen to even be a 2026 big league option, right? Because ultimately, like when you drafted Hagen Smith, like there's some things to figure out here still with his command, with his sequencing, with the way he's working on the mound. You're still expecting him to be a 2026 rotation piece for the White Sox. Maybe it's not the beginning of the year. That's fine. You don't need to push it, the agenda. Like he's only 22, or he's 21 still actually for another month. Like you don't need to push it super quickly. But at the same time, I want him to be on this roster come sometime next year. Exactly. So you got to build those innings at some point. Even if it's only 4 or 5 inning starts, you don't need him to go deep into games every day. But you need him to make more than 2 2/3 inning appearances. And maybe it's just a slow build up, and maybe he's going to go 4 next outing, then 5 the next outing. And like that's fine. If that's the plan, that's fine. I just am curious to see kind of what it looks like for the rest of the season, and then going into the fall league maybe and the offseason and beyond for Hagen.
Yeah, and then that pretty much wraps up Birmingham. Yeah. We can go down to Winston, but it was a rough week for Winston.
Just backing up a little bit. Birmingham's 43 and 38 now on the season. I should have mentioned that. Gotcha. They're still playing some pretty good ball. They're above 500. They've been ups and downs for sure, but they're in Biloxi now this week. And then Winston is 29 and 51. It's been rough for a little while now for Winston here for sure.
Yeah, but one bright spot on that Winston team has been Christian Opper. His last start on July 2nd, 5 innings, 4 hits, 2 earned runs. It came on a home run, no walks, 10 strikeouts. Elijah, 10 punch-outs in 5 innings.
I didn't get to watch that start. I watched the clips, but that looked pretty electric.
Yeah, it tied his season high. He struck out 10 in his first affiliate start on April 9th when he was still in Kannapolis. But, I mean, Christian Opper has just looked unreal this season. I think he's blown everybody's expectations for him out of the water, and he's throwing hard. He's sustaining velo late in the games. I think you mentioned he had 100. Like if that velo is real and he can be, I don't want to say Tanner McDougal, but like if he can consistently hold velo in the upper 90s, I really don't. It's similar to Tanner McDougal. Like I don't think that there are 12, even 10 prospects better than Christian Opper.
Yeah. Yeah, it's getting there for sure. I think he's still in terms of overall like arsenal as a pitcher and development, I think he's still a step behind where McDougal's at right now, maybe just
Yeah,
because McDougal's been around a little bit longer. He's continuing to work up the levels, but Opper, he's missing bats, man, and he's really been very effective with stuff. I think that the sweeper has been excellent. The fastball, it's heat, but it's also he's he's developing a really keen sense of locating the fastball and using the whole zone with it, which is great to see for a young guy because I think especially young guys, in their first or second season at the lower levels can often be a little bit hesitant to really ring the fastball up the ladder. And Opper's not. Opper really goes for it sometimes. And then he works the sweeper in. And the sweeper, I noticed in that time when I was watching the clips, and I have it pulled up right now, is some backdoor sweepers, which you don't see a lot. You really don't see a ton
yeah,
of right on, lefty on righty sweepers that are effective and not necessarily just coming in, because typically you see an opposite side sweeper kind of coming into a hitter's wheelhouse. And that's something
right.
that is, a very hesitant thing. And that's why Opper has the changeup, and the changeup's been effective for the most part. Give up one homer on the changeup. He just hung it a little bit, but with him, I've noticed a number of sweepers against righties, which is, at the higher levels might not play quite as well, but
Right.
it's really good to see Opper continuing to just develop it and change the way he pitches and just keep working on his craft really. And it seems like he's getting better and better every start in Winston for sure.
100%. And, if he can just continue to just fine tune everything, like he's still very young. He's 20 years old for the entirety of the season. Like there's no reason to rush him. Like if he can be that Tanner McDougal archetype, we could see him, be that top 5 prospect in the system in 2027, which is only 2 years away somehow.
Sure.
But other pitchers, another pitcher that had a good week, Jake Bockenstead, 6 innings, 3 hits, 2 runs, neither were earned, no walks, 7 strikeouts. It's Bockenstead is a little bit older. He's 25, going to be 26 in the offseason. So, it might be time for him to show what he can do in Double-A. But, he's quietly stringing together some good starts. And,
Nice.
that Winston-Salem rotation does need help. They need all the good pitching performances they can get with how bad their hitting has been recently. But, Bockenstead is he's a guy that I think could be in line for promotion in the coming weeks or months.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. Not much to mention the hitting side. I think we can kind of skip
Yeah.
over. It's been a real rough couple weeks here on the offensive side. Aside from Sammy Zavala, actually, we had a pretty good week here. Sammy Zavala, I mentioned, has had generally a very solid month or two in general. Zavala is starting to put some things together. I think he's going to be, a guy that he's still young. He's 20 years old in high A, and we've really seen a pretty solid month and a half from him. But yeah, not much else to mention there offensively in Winston.
Yeah, and then we can move down to Kannapolis now. TJ McCants has really quietly been a key point in that offense. Last week batted over 300 with 9 strikeouts, which is a lot in 24 at bats. But he's a guy where older college guy and has played a really good defensive center field. I think that he could be in line for a promotion to Winston after the draftees get their chance to move up. Because he's how old is he? He's 20. Yeah, he's 24, just turned 24 in June.
Yeah.
So I think we're ready to see what TJ McCants can do. I know that he was on the injured list up until about a month ago, I want to say, but he's been really good since coming off it.
Yeah, 100%. McCants has looked good for sure. That whole draft class in general, last year's draft class, especially on the college side, there's definitely, not as much that we would have wanted to see from a lot of that
Right.
class so far in the first professional season. Definitely some injuries, some guys going through surgery, some guys getting adjusted. So I'm curious to see what happens with a lot of those draft class guys, because there's a good amount of older, experienced college players from that draft class we just really haven't seen kind of take off yet. There's a couple that have, right? We've seen a couple really ascend and they're already in Winston, right? But there's a lot of those guys still in Kannapolis, or even, some of them still rehabbing or working through stuff in Arizona. You got to start seeing those guys move. I think next year it's like that 2024 draft class. You really got to start seeing those college guys pop a little bit next season to be penciling any of those guys in as, longer term pieces at all.
100%. And then Caleb Bonnemer had his best week in a bit. But he had 2 homers, batted 333, struck out 4 times over 22 plate appearances. But, that's more than fine. That's a sub 20% rate. And, it hasn't been the best for Bonnemer recently. He's getting unlucky. He's still hitting the ball hard pretty consistently, and he's limiting the strikeouts more than what we would expect, more than what we expected from him coming into the year. But, after his hot start of the year where he was only striking out like 15% of the time.
Insane.
Yeah, just ridiculous. He's cooled off, which, I think was to be expected. But, he's still looked really good for a 19-year-old in his first taste of professional baseball. Like 2 homers in his last 5 games. He's looked really solid.
Yeah, 100%. Good to see him bounce back. It was a little bit of a rough little run just in general. But it's pretty good. Bounce back from him. I'm not worried about it. And he really, at this point, anything he does keeping going is kind of icing. And I just think he's just going to keep getting better, but I think it's obviously a long season. It takes a toll on. I think Jeff had a good clip from him talking to him in Kannapolis where, he talks about like, hey, this is more games than I've ever played. And it's, 6 days a week and you don't do that. And like for him to continue to kind of have these downs and these tough stretches, but work through them really just shows, the talent he has. And I think next season when he's really has a full season under his belt, we'll see even more of that consistent upside.
100%. And then another young shortstop in Kannapolis, Ryan Burroughs. He had a decent week last week. Batted 300, only struck out 5 times in 22 plate appearances. It's a lot of singles recently. He had 6 hits on the week. All of them were singles. But, Burroughs is starting to show some of that prospect pedigree that he had when the White Sox initially signed him. And, it's not been the best professional career for Burroughs, but there are signs with him that you think it's coming all together. Then he goes on a streak where he strikes out 15 times in 35 plate appearances, and then you're like, okay, what gives? But he's really quietly been better this year than I think a lot of people were expecting.
Yeah, no, he's putting it together a little bit, and especially recently, which has been nice to see from him. Talented guy, and I've always liked the tool set. It just hasn't quite come together in terms of consistent production, but stealing bags lately, he's hitting pretty well. You said last 15 games, hitting 325, so definitely some things to build off there for Burroughs, and I think that, next season will kind of be that test. We'll have to see it at the next level, right? He's 20 at this point, right? So he came into Kannapolis when he was 18, I think, and it was like, oh, he's super young, and now it's like, okay, we got to see it and continue to move forward, but nice to see him kind of finding his groove here.
100%. And Grant Umberger just continues to deal. His last start on the second, 6 innings, 3 hits, no earned runs, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts. And like 2 walks is, I don't want to say a lot for Grant Umberger, but like he's usually a guy where it's 0, 1. Like he's been really good for that Kannapolis rotation. And I think that he's a guy that, like I said, with TJ McCants, he's going to be a guy who's going to get the bump up once the guys who get drafted in the next 6 days here, once they get up to Kannapolis, he should be on a direct flight or plane or car trip to Winston-Salem.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It is a car trip. It's not too far away, right down the street. But yeah, no, Umberger should be there already in Winston. I think with the way the Winston staff and season has gone, like I would get him there ASAP. Any other arms to mention?
Luis Reyes has been pretty good recently. He's had his ups and downs as pretty much any young pitcher would have in, their first taste of big league or professional ball. But, his last start wasn't great, 5 innings, 4 earned runs, but he didn't get a lot of help from his defense. He had 3 unearned runs. But then the start before that, 6 innings, 3 hits, none earned, 1 walk, 6 punch outs. So he's been a really just interesting piece to watch because you see starts with him where everything is clicking and he's hitting his spots, even using his high effort delivery that, might push him to the bullpen long term. And then there are starts where, he doesn't know where anything is going and he's hanging a lot of pitches and he's walking guys. But, Luis Reyes is really been a guy who has put his name on the map this year. He was, I think you were talking to Dan Haloti, or is it Dan in Kannapolis?
Yeah.
But yeah, you were talking to him preseason, and he was like, "Yeah, this guy's the nastiest guy in the rotation right now." And I think we've seen some of that nastiness. It's been, like I said, it's come and gone. But when it's on, Reyes is really good.
Yeah, no, he's been good, and 19 years old. The stuff is okay. I think the stuff can continue to tick up. I genuinely, looking at his numbers, just some of the metrics behind it, like I think that there's more in the tank for him. So his results being as good as they've been at Kannapolis at 19 years old, and then the potential for the stuff to tick up, it makes it really exciting, honestly.
100%. And then Blake Shepardson. I know that we've long liked him in terms of like the stuff and just the overall like profile, but the last couple outings, he's really started to find his groove. He walked 2 batters in 2 innings on the 28th, and then he walked another 2 on the third. So I guess it's not really. I was gonna make a point how he hadn't walked a batter in 6 outings, but he did walk 2 on the third. But he's striking out pretty much everybody. His last appearances, 3 strikeouts, 5 strikeouts in what is that, 4 and a third innings. So he's got 11 punch outs in 4 and a third. So he's striking out 11 of 13 outs. Like he's always had the high octane stuff, and it's just all coming together now for him.
Yeah, love to see it from Shepardson. Great dude. I've talked to him a couple times, and then he just continues to look like he's just getting better. He's finding himself 100%. So I'm excited to see where he keeps going. And being a college guy, I could easily see Shepardson getting a taste of high A here at the end of the season for sure if he keeps trending this direction.
Definitely. I think that wraps it up.
Nice. So that's what we've got there. That's kind of what's going on in the farm right now. We love checking in and just seeing, who's doing what's everything happening down on the farm. But at the big league level, we are just about 3 weeks out, a little over 3 weeks out from the deadline. There are some players the White Sox may not have thought, it was more, you take shots in the dark. You take shots on guys when you're in this status as an organization. You pick guys up, you get your vets, you try to move them in any way you can if they perform, right? There's going to be rentals, right? The White Sox, the one asset, larger, obviously we've talked about Luis Robert a million times. We'll continue to talk about that. I'm going to try and put together some mocks because I just don't even, it's hard to even think about what a trade looks like for him at this point. It's funky. It's a tricky one, definitely. But we will get there. Oh, yeah. At some point, they asked about the ACL. Somebody asked about the ACL and the DSL. We'll do a little episode sometime soon on that because I don't like. It's just so hard when you don't have real video and information. But I do want to try to do a dive into the Complex League and the Dominican Summer League because I do think that the White Sox have more talent there than they've had in quite some 100%. Time. Yobo Rodriguez is the DSL highlight, pitching like crazy there. You've got some hitters like Eduardo Herrera, Christian Gonzalez, Yordani Soto. In the ACL, you've got Adrian Heel. You got Matthias Lacumbe, who we're just waiting to get to Kannapolis, right? So a lot to talk about there. We'll snag it another time. But for now, we'll talk some trade candidates. For you, keeping Luis Robert out of this for now, starting on the offensive side, who are kind of the pieces you're kind of circling and saying, all right, there's going to be a legit return here of some sort. Not legit, we don't mean top 100 prospect, right? Yeah. By legit, we mean something of value for the future of the organization.
I mean, I keep posting the meme, but give us your best prospect for Mike Tauchman. Like, he's got, I think his OPS is still above 800, and he's batting close to 300 on the year, and he's got another year of control. So, he's probably a 4th outfielder on a contending team, but, he is able to hit the ball on the screws, and I feel like he's just been banged up all year, and they're just forcing him to kind of tough it out and play right field or DH. Because if you look at his sprint speed by year, it's gone down consistently to it was in the 90th percentile in 2018, 2019. Right. And then it just randomly dropped down from 45th percentile last year to 8th this year. So I feel like there's something wrong with him. I know he had that leg injury in Cleveland where he pulled up and didn't score the game tying run. But I feel like he's going to get at least something. Outfielders, especially this deadline, are few and far between. And, if somebody wants to give up their 20th best prospect for Mike Tauchman, sure, sign me up. I don't care.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. I think Mike Tauchman's he's been a good hitter, man. Like I think if he had more games under his belt, he probably could have been the White Sox All Star. Honestly, as
Oh
crazy
yeah,
as that might
100%.
sound, he's hitting 294 this season and 826 OBS. He's
Yeah,
getting on base. He strikes out at a reasonable rate. He's walking at a decent clip. He's not going to give you a ton of power, but he's going to tap into some stuff sometimes. Like it's it's just been good. And you look around the league, and there's a lot of contenders that need outfield help, man. There is
yeah,
a lot of contenders. We see some guys mentioning stuff. I think you could look at a bunch of different guys and a bunch of different teams, pardon me, and say, oh, that team could use an outfielder. That team could use
right.
an outfielder. And like it goes down the line for a lot of teams, honestly. So I think it'll be interesting to see what Mike Tauchman's market looks like. And yes, it's not going to be a haul. You're going to get one
Right.
prospect,
Yeah.
and it's going to be a decent flyer. I'm good with that though. That's a good return for a guy you signed to a 1 year deal and a guy that's in the clubhouse, giving some veteran leadership and playing good ball, giving it solid presence at the top of the order right now. Like, awesome, cool, works for me.
Yeah, that's totally fine for a guy that you signed. I don't even know how much you signed him for. He's
He was like a 4 million, 5 million 1 year deal.
yeah,
Like,
something like that.
awesome,
Yeah, sure,
great.
fine. Don't care.
Exactly. So that works 100% in my eyes. I think it's a good situation there for the White Sox. I think the Astros make some sense. I think the Phillies could make some sense. Who else am I thinking? I think you could make it the Padres make some sense for
Yeah, I
sure.
was gonna
I
say
think the
them.
Giants could make some sense. I think there's a good
Are the
amount of teams
Giants
on that
really gonna?
list.
Are the Giants really a contender though?
Are the Giants still going to buy even if they're not contending? Probably.
Yeah, they're always weird, but
They're
hey,
finicky. Yeah,
yeah,
there's a lot. That's a lot of options already that we're talking about there of teams who could be a very decent option at the very least to be moved in that type of deal. So I think Tauchman is going to be he's going to get something, and that's better than getting nothing for sure.
100%. And then Adrian Hauser. I feel like Chris Getz just signed him off the street, and then he's put up 2.4 B WAR in 8 starts. Like it's just been really fun to watch Adrian Hauser pitch.
Pretty nuts,
Uh,
actually, man.
yeah, I don't. I really didn't expect this out of any pitcher on the White Sox this year. But he's gonna get something at the deadline, right? Like there's always a need for starting pitching, and if he can be a playoff team's 3 or 4, like sure, like yeah, if somebody wants to give up their, like I said for Talkman, their 20th best prospect for Adrian Hauser, sign me up because he wasn't pitching on the White Sox in May, or I think it was late May that he signed. But like, yeah, sure, I
Right.
get whatever you can for Adrian Hauser.
Adrian Hauser actually might be the best asset return,
Oh
honestly,
yeah,
when you really look at
100%.
it, because there's starting pitching is the most valuable commodity in baseball, and consistent starting. It's just it's something everybody needs, and I think that
Right.
there's always going to be a continual need and a reason for that, right? So at that point, like you could get something. I think
Yeah.
you can get a piece for sure. I mean, what contender doesn't need starting pitching right now? I think you can look at
I don't
pretty
know.
much every. I mean, I think the Tigers are going to add a starter. I think the Astros could add a starter. I think you're going to get. I think the Phillies the one where they're kind of set pitching wise. The Phillies
Yeah,
are probably the
probably.
deepest pitching staff right now, but the Mets are pretty set for the most part. But the Cubs are going to add pitching. The Brewers probably, if they want to try to buy, they'll add pitching. The Dodgers are going to add pitching. Padres are going to add pitching. There's a lot of teams that are going to add pitching, and I think Hauser could be a very good fit for many of those teams. So I think that Hauser, as a if you're trying to put him as your 5 starter and you look at what he's done this season, you probably feel pretty good about trading
Right.
a top 10 to 15 system prospect for a guy like that.
Yeah, 100%. And then, there's other names that could get traded from that pitching staff. I don't think we're going to see a Davis Martin trade. Yeah, he was a guy that,
Because of the injury,
yeah,
pre-injury you might have, honestly.
yeah, we were kind of kicking the tires around on that, but with the injury, I don't think you see him get traded anymore. And then, you can always trade bullpen pieces. If somebody wants to give up something for a Brandon Isert, Steven Wilson, Tyler Gilbert, even, I don't think he's going
Gilbert's
to.
been sneaky solid.
Yeah,
Dan Altavia's been sneaky solid.
yeah,
I don't
I don't
think
know.
you get anything in a trade for him, but like, I mean, if you can,
Yeah,
Aaron
sure.
Savale, if you can trade him for anything, sure. I
Yeah,
think a lot of these guys are just like, if you get a piece for them, if you get somebody with some upside, great. I think you're holding on to Mike Vassell. I think you're holding on to a number of those other guys that are some of the younger guys, right? I think you're still holding on to the core, the younger pitchers, right? guys like Shane Smith, Cannon, of course, Burke, of course.
Yeah.
Like, those are not guys you're moving at this point, I don't think. But I do think one or two of the bullpen guys will probably get moved for something. The offensive side, I think Michael Taylor could sneaky get something.
Yeah.
I think Michael Taylor has been a decent player, and he's been an energy piece, and he's kind of has an established rep in the league as a solid defender with some speed. He can get on base. He's again, the numbers aren't gonna wow you, right? It's a 700 or so OPS this season, right? Like, it's nothing crazy, but a versatile, solid defensive outfielder who in the past month or two has actually been a really solid hitter. I think we'll net something for the White Sox.
Yeah, I think I was looking at his numbers like either yesterday or the day before, but like since May 1st, he's got a WRC plus over 100. And, for a guy like Michael A. Taylor, that is like hitting like Barry Bonds. Like, he has not hit like that at all in his career. Granted, he is still striking out at a 40% rate in that stretch. So he's getting a little bit of BABIP luck on his side. But, he's a good defender. And, if he can show that he can hit like he has been, somebody's gonna trade for him. It's the similar vein to, it's similar to like Adrian Hauser, where teams are gonna want a good defensive outfielder. Even if he's the fourth outfielder on a contending team, he's a perfectly fine fourth outfielder.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, since June 1st, it's a 140 WRC plus with an 11% walk rate and a 31% strikeout rate. Sure, but 31% strikeout rate, if you're 140 WRC plus walking over 10% of the time, I mean, yeah, it's a limited sample for sure. He's not playing every day, but again, like, I'm cool with that. If it's a flyer, if it's a back end top 30 guy, even if it's an ACL guy who's making noise this season, like, cool. Like, that's the type of piece you take. These are all pieces you take. Same thing goes for Austin Slater. A little bit worse of a season generally, compared to Michael Taylor. I think Michael Taylor's been better of late, but Slater on the season, he hasn't played a ton. He had the injuries and whatever, but still a 733 OPS. And this is a guy who in his career has mashed lefties. So if you're looking at a team that's gonna, he's got an 833 OPS against lefties this season. He's primarily playing against lefties. If you're looking for a team that needs a platoon guy that just wants someone that they can plug against left-handed pitching, as the 8-9 hitter in a lineup playing some solid right field, like, Austin Slater can get you something, right? It can get you a flyer, right? That's fine by me. That's another guy that definitely I think could be in that realm. One guy, Josh Rojas, at this point, I don't think you're getting anything from. Maybe you're getting one flyer from Rojas. If you can get a flyer, great. Clears up the innings that you need to clear up for Colson, Elko, Mydroth, etc. Do you think Lenyn Sosa could be on the table at the deadline?
I was just about to ask you this because I think he is. I think that with the, I don't want to say infield logjam because there really isn't a logjam, but like, I feel like he's sort of the odd man out because if you're going to play Colson at short and Chase at second every day, I feel like there's just no room for him unless
you're trying to play him at first still, but and he's been playing some first, but
I think he does get moved because he's been hitting. I mean, when he makes contact, he hits, but then he's swinging at every pitch within like a 5-mile radius of home plate. And then you get swings like the one against Barrios today where he gets posted on Pitching Ninja like 2 seconds after it happened. So,
yeah,
and
it's not, on the season, it's not great offensively overall, but even since like May, since in the last, since May 1st, so the last 2 months, if you take out a really rough April for him, it's a 105 WRC plus. It's, a 278 batting average since the beginning of May. Doesn't walk at all, which is an issue for sure. But a number of home runs, a number of doubles, 10 doubles in that span since the beginning of May, 5 homers, right? Like, Lenyn Sosa's doing something. I think that he's doing, a little more than I maybe expected. I'll give him some credit for that. But at the same time, like, do you think he's a long-term piece with the rest of the infield pieces? And if you don't, then try to get him something for him. He's only 25 years old. He's got 4 years of club control still. Like, I think there's a team that would maybe pick him up as a bench piece. Maybe not the most realistic trade, but another person you can at least consider, the possibility if somebody's interested. And you could package him, right? He could be a guy that you package with a reliever to a team that just wants a bench bat and then a reliever, or they want Adrian Hauser and they want just a depth infielder who can kind of help bolster the depth of the roster, right? Like, those are options and those are things you can do. And I think getting creative with trades will be interesting to see what Chris Getz does here, because I do think that you can kind of make the most of the situation and find the ability to just to get just as much value as you can from the, the handful of guys on the roster that have some value on it and, aren't part of the future.
Right. And like it's pretty much what we've been saying like this entire time. You know, the guys on this roster outside of the rookies, they're not going to be here in 2 years. Even
Right.
some are going to be gone in 3 weeks, some are going to be gone at the end of the season. Like there's going to be a lot of roster churning and turnover just to see who sticks. And you know,
Right.
if somebody out of the woodworks comes out and ends up being a core piece, or but you know, you're not gonna be able to find that when you have a Ryan Noda or a Josh Rojas playing every day. So
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. I'm 100% with you there. That's what we got for today. That should be all. We kept going here. Appreciate everyone chatting in the comments and hanging out with us for a little bit. We got a ton coming up. Like I said, we got Pete Flaherty, we got Joe Doyle, both doing draft previews this week. We've got a draft stream coming up. We're gonna have a ton of good content here rolling. After the draft, we'll be diving into all that. Yeah, stay tuned with Future Sox and the roundup and the podcast and hot takes and heaters and everything we've got going on here. And we will check in this week, Dill. I think we'll see each other at some point on the live stream, and if not, I'm sure we will be talking and tweeting and interacting plenty during the MLB draft. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time on the roundup.
Thank you guys.